Hello there. Tonight we are going to slip into the velvet shadows of ancient Persia, where the palaces shimmer like mirages and the rules for women are stitched tighter than your grandmother's best shawl. You're not just anyone, you're a young woman in the heart of the Achaemenid Empire, brushing the dust from your ankles in a courtyard that smells like warm dates and jasmine. The stone walls around you are tall. The air is heavy, and the eyes that watch you never seem to blink. You haven't done anything wrong, but you feel like you're already guilty of being seen. You're 16, maybe younger. Your mother has taught you how to grind barley with quiet efficiency and how to braid your hair so neatly that no strand dares rebel. But the real education is unspoken. You've learned to keep your voice soft, your gaze lower, and your thoughts quieter still. There's an art to survival here, and it begins with obedience dressed in silk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Post your location and the local time you're drifting off from. I love knowing where these stories land in the world. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. The palace of Persepolis looms in the distance, all polished stone and lion carvings. But you're not getting any closer than this dusty edge. You're in a courtyard on the outskirts, watching from beneath your veil as the world spins wildly without you. The birds call from the rooftops, but no one hears you. There's an embroidered curtain swaying in the breeze. Behind it, the ladies of the court are giggling softly. You know the sound? Well, it's a kind of choreography. Laugh at the right pitch, blink at the right speed, walk like you're floating, and never ever let your ankles show unless you want to be tomorrow's gossip. You've just learned to pull your veil a little tighter. The cloth itches in the heat, especially where it presses against the beads of sweat trickling down your temple. But modesty is more important than comfort, and so you scratch in secret and smile in silence. Your older cousin Layla says the key to surviving here is looking delicate, but working like an ox behind the scenes. She's 15 and already has 2 suitors. She calls them the snorer and the one with the goat teeth. Romance is not really part of the deal. From birth, you've been taught that your greatest contribution will be sons, ideally strong ones, ideally quiet ones. Your worth is measured in dowry and decency, not in curiosity, not in wit, and certainly not in volume. You tried once to ask your uncle why women couldn't ride horses. He told you to hush and handed you some lentils. You got the message. Historians still debate whether women in ancient Persia were more liberated than their Greek counterparts. Some point to the fact that elite women managed estates and gave counsel behind the veil. Others say that for most the home was not just a sanctuary, it was a soft, padded prison. You overhear your father talking about the road to Sardis, how smooth it's been paved by royal decree. A marvel, he says. Couriers can cross the empire in days, but no one asks where the women go. You already know the answer: the kitchen, the bathhouse, and the occasional courtyard gathering where gossip flows like watered-down wine. Speaking of wine, the men are drinking it again tonight. You can hear their laughter, the clatter of cups, the way the sound swells and fades like a tide. You don't join them. You serve them. If you're lucky, someone lets you lick the honey from the rim of a cup before passing it back to be washed. Here's a fun little fact to make you smile. Some Persian women believe that tying a red thread around their ankle during a full moon would bring them a gentle husband. You tried it last month. So far, no sign of a miracle, but you're still hoping. Tonight you grind barley. Not because anyone asked you to, but because it gives your hands something to do. The weight of the stone feels familiar now, like a second heartbeat. Around you, the world glimmers with gold and empire. But all you see are stone walls, clay bowls, and a future mapped out in someone else's handwriting. You pause to look up at the stars. They seem closer here, maybe because the air smells so old. Maybe because no one has asked you to look down yet. You wonder if there's a woman out there in the heavens watching you. A goddess who once had dreams and now watches quietly as girls like you carry on without glory. Down the alley, someone is singing, a lullaby maybe. It reminds you that you're not alone. There are other girls like you, quiet ones, tired ones, stronger than they look, stronger than the world ever admits. Tomorrow someone will ask you to smile more. Someone will remind you that the best women are invisible. Someone will compliment your braid, but not your thoughts. But tonight, under this slow-breathing sky, you let yourself imagine a world where the walls are lower, the fabric is softer, and you don't have to carry silence like a second veil. You smile to yourself softly, rebelliously, because the stars are watching and you're still here. You're walking barefoot across polished stone, the tiles cool underfoot and patterned with lion heads and stylized flowers. You've been summoned to the palace not as a guest, of course, but to help your cousin who works as a maid in the women's wing. You've never seen anything like this place. The ceilings are so high they could house a flock of swallows, and the air smells of frankincense and expensive soap. But even here, in the glittering heart of the empire, the women are tucked behind layers of curtain ritual and fear, and your cousin, who's seen more than she says, leans over and whispers. They move like shadows, the royal wives. You picture Queen Atossa, daughter of Cyrus the Great, whose name you've only heard in hushed tones. She's not just a pretty face swaddled in gold, she's one of the most politically savvy women in the empire. But if she sneezes wrong in front of the king, the gold turns to a cage fast. You watch a procession glide down the hall, tall women in embroidered robes, lips tight, eyes forward. They look untouchable, almost divine. But you can feel the tension like a taut string beneath the surface. Here, power is a performance and one that never ends. A queen's voice may reach the king's ear, but only if whispered sweetly through layers of ceremony. No shouting, no standing tall, just gentle pressure like a bead of water shaping stone over decades. The guards are everywhere. Not the regular soldiers, but eunuchs, men who've been changed so they pose no threat to the king's harem. Their eyes miss nothing. Their feet make no sound. You adjust your scarf and try to blend into the wall. No one wants to be noticed in a place like this unless they're ready for the consequences. And still the women here are not without power. Atossa, according to some old scribes, was rumored to have influenced major decisions during her son Xerxes' reign. Imagine her in robes heavier than a toddler, offering strategic counsel while the scribes pretended not to listen. That's the job here. Be invisible but indispensable. Here's something quirky for you. Royal women sometimes owned entire estates, including farmlands and livestock, all managed by stewards, while their husbands were away fighting wars. There's a clay tablet in a museum somewhere listing one queen's property, down to the last olive tree. It's not freedom exactly, but it's something. Like being allowed to hold the leash that keeps you tethered. You catch sight of the harem's inner courtyard. Its beautiful peacocks strut across mosaic floors, fountains murmur softly in corners, and everywhere there are silk cushions and polished brass. But the walls are high. You notice the doors thick-guarded and always closed. Behind them live the other women concubines, noble daughters, political pawns from distant satrapies. Historians still debate whether these women had any real say in their fate. Some claim they were savvy diplomats marrying to seal alliances and secure influence. Others argue they were high-ranking prisoners dressed in silk but bound by protocol and spies. You lean toward the second camp, especially after catching the glimpse of a concubine flinching at a servant's glance. Your cousin tells you that once a woman inside these walls laughed too loudly and was confined to her room for a month. Not punished, just reminded to behave. The laughter stopped after that. You pass a long hallway where frescoes depict triumphant kings, war horses, and mythical beasts. Not a single woman appears in the artwork. You could almost believe they didn't exist if it weren't for the fact that they keep this palace breathing, cooking, organizing, birthing heirs. And yet here they are, essential but invisible. At dinner, the royal banquet begins without them. The men feast in grand halls, wine flowing like river water, the scent of roasted lamb heavy in the air. The women dine separately, their voices low, their laughter rehearsed. You refill cups, adjust veils, and listen, always listening, Someone mentions that the queen has been trying to conceive again. The pressure is enormous. If she doesn't produce a son, her position may weaken. You think of your own mother, who whispered to you once a girl has to be clever with her silence. It made no sense at the time. It makes too much sense now. You sneak out to the edge of the gardens where the air is cooler, the silence deeper. The moonlight spills over manicured hedges and lily ponds. Somewhere a nightingale sings. You wonder what it must feel like to walk freely here, to speak your mind, to be seen. Not as decoration, not as property, just as you. You smile at the idea. It's dangerous to wish for too much here, but still the thought lingers. Behind you, the palace hums with secrets. You return to your cousin who's folding laundry as though each towel contains a whispered instruction. You help her quietly. Tomorrow, you'll leave this place and return to your simpler world of grinding grain and gossiping aunties. But for tonight, you've glimpsed the stage where queens play their silent games. And what you've learned is this: the crown may glitter, but the bars of the cage are polished too. The palace has disappeared behind you now, its high walls and glinting mosaics swallowed up by the dust of the village road. There are no silk cushions here, no gilded fountains or pomegranate wine, only the scent of cracked earth dung fires and barley soaked in yesterday's water. You're not a noblewoman. You're not a concubine. You're a common woman in the belly of the empire, where life is built on calloused hands and blistered feet. The day begins long before the sun. You wake to the sound of goats arguing and your sister coughing in the next room. There's no time for stretching or stargazing. The fire needs lighting, the water needs hauling, and someone knocked over the lentils again. You shuffle to your feet and wrap your shawl tight, the cold of dawn biting your ankles. Your feet hit the packed dirt floor, and just like that, you're already behind. You balance the clay jar on your hip and head to the well. It's a familiar path, worn smooth by the feet of every woman who came before you. Each step is like an echo. Your mother walked this path. So did your grandmother. And maybe the woman before her who whispered lullabies to a baby on her back while fetching water in the same cracked jar. The morning light is pale and drowsy. You pass the neighbor's courtyard and nod to her daughter already kneading dough with flower-streaked arms. No one here sleeps in. Sleep is something you sneak in fragments like figs hidden from hungry cousins. You greet the rooster that doesn't know when to stop crowing, curse the stone that finds your toe every morning, and reach the well with a groan and a yawn that smells like ash and old lentils. You lower the bucket into the darkness. The rope creaks, the water sloshes, your arms ache before you've even begun your real chores. You wonder, not for the first time, what it would feel like to draw water without thinking of everything else waiting for you: grinding barley, spinning wool, scolding children, keeping the fire just right so the pot doesn't boil over. By midday, your hair is stuck to your neck, your shawl damp with sweat, and your hands have already done more than most men will do all week. You've spun 2 bundles of yarn, patched a tunic, and managed to keep your toddler from throwing a clay cup at the neighbor's goat. That's something you think. It's not a statue or a scroll with your name on it, but it's something. Historians still debate whether women like you, village women, had more agency than their palace-bound counterparts. Some say you were freer, that without the constant surveillance of eunuchs and royal spies, you had room to breathe, to bend the rules when no one was watching. Others argue that you were just as trapped, only your cage was made of obligation, not gold. You're leaning toward the second opinion as you haul firewood on your back, trying not to drop it while your cousin complains about her husband's toenails again. You smile politely, but inside you're counting how many more chores you can squeeze in before sundown. The wood digs into your shoulder. Your sandals are worn. Your patience is a thread pulled taut. Still, there's a strange rhythm to it all. You know exactly how many steps it takes to get from the well to the house without spilling the water. You know how many lentils you need to feed 5 people without running short. You can spin wool while nursing a baby and scolding a chicken. You are efficiency wrapped in homespun wool, and no one even says thank you. Here's a quirky little fact. To lighten the load, some rural Persian women were known to brew a thick porridge-like beer from fermented barley. It wasn't the kind of drink you toasted over a fire with court musicians, but it had a pleasant enough kick, and if you brewed it right, it wouldn't make you sick. Today, you're stirring a clay pot of it, with the faint hope that you can trade a jug of the stuff for a new pair of sandals at the market next week. Maybe. The beer bubbles. You watch it simmer and think about the hands that shaped the pot, the woman who taught you to brew the daughter, watching you now with curious eyes. You tell her the story about the beer that turned a lazy goat into a singing one, and she laughs, spilling flour all over the floor. You'll sweep it later. Right now her laugh feels like medicine. You think about the palace women again. Would Atossa, queen of queens, ever stand over a pot like this? Would she know how to fix a broken loom with nothing but a shard of wood and a curse? Probably not, but she had a different skill set, whispering strategy to a king without being punished for thinking. That takes a kind of brilliance too. Still, you wouldn't trade your beer pot for her jeweled sandals, not entirely. By afternoon, the sun has turned the courtyard into a frying pan. You pause in the shade with your neighbor's legs tucked under you, hands still working. There's a kind of communion in shared labor. You complain about your husband snoring. Someone jokes about the priest's nose hair. Laughter peels through the heat like water on dry stones. It's not freedom, but it's survival with a smile. You share figs. You braid your sister's hair. You help a younger girl fix her first crooked embroidery stitch. These are the things no empire sees, but they hold it up just the same. Behind every nobleman's fine robe is a woman who spun the thread, dyed the fabric, and stitched the seams in candlelight while listening to mice scrabble behind the jars. You're not rich, but you're resourceful. You know how to stretch flour to last 3 days. You can tell which herbs help with headaches and which ones should be whispered about instead of named. You know how to sneak a nap under the loom without your mother-in-law catching you. When evening comes, you light the small lamp and settle down to spin by its flicker. The courtyard smells of cooked lentils, baked clay, and lavender from someone's garden wall. You hum to yourself. Your daughter curls up beside you. Your hands keep working, but your mind drifts. You think of the clay tablets the scribes used to record the empire's triumphs. Battles, taxes, laws. Not one will mention the woman who kept the house warm, the child clean, or the barley from burning. But you know. And maybe that's enough. You think of the stars above Susa, above Persepolis, above every field and village from one end of the empire to the other. They shine on queens and concubines, slaves and scribes, and on you barefoot, tired, quietly powerful. You breathe in. You exhale. You stretch your hands, shake off the ache, and finish one more row of yarn. You are not in the reliefs carved into palace walls, but you are in every thread that keeps this empire from unraveling. You're standing in the middle of the courtyard, your hands damp with flour and your heart hammering just slightly faster than usual. Your mother is fussing with your hair, muttering about stray strands, and your aunt is laying out bowls of dates and honey for the visitors. You're not weaving cooking or hauling water today, not because it's a holiday, but because it's something worse. Today they're negotiating your future. You're 16. Maybe. No one keeps close track. All you know is that your father has spent the past week visiting neighbors, whispering with merchants, and eyeing every man in town with land goats or even the faintest whiff of ambition. It's marriage season, and you are, how did the scribe put it, of appropriate age. You're not sure who decided what age is appropriate, but it wasn't you. The rules are simple, and none of them are yours. A dowry has already been calculated, bolts of cloth. You helped weave a few modest pieces of jewelry and 2 goats that you've named and are pretending not to love. These will be packaged up alongside you as if you're all part of one convenient household starter kit. Your worth is a sum scribbled in your father's head, your future traded like barley at the market. Mainstream history tells us that marriage in the Achaemenid Empire wasn't really about love. It was a tool of diplomacy, inheritance, and order. Families married to strengthen bonds, combine property, and keep bloodlines tidy. Love might happen later, like weather or toothaches. But no one waited for it. You peek through the curtain into the room where the men are talking. Your future husband might be the one with the neat beard and the nervous cough, or he might be the older man leaning against the post, the one who smells like roasted onions and doesn't meet your eyes. Either way, your opinion won't be requested. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some rare cases, Persians used temporary marriage contracts. The idea was that a couple could agree to marry for a fixed period, months, a few years, and then either renew or part ways. Imagine a trial run for matrimony. You once whispered to your cousin that it sounded like a way to return a husband if he turned out to be a snorer. She laughed so hard, she dropped the lentils. But you won't get a trial. You get the real thing. Permanent, sealed by gifts, handshakes, and ceremony. You're about to step into a lifetime written by other people's expectations. Historians still argue whether women had any say in the process. Some point to elite women who arranged politically significant marriages, suggesting at least a few had some leverage. Others insist that common girls like you had no such room. A glance here, a whisper there perhaps, but choice not really. Choice not. You try to remember everything your mother told you. Smile even if you're terrified. Speak softly, but not too softly, or they'll think you're slow. Keep your eyes low, but not on the ground. That makes you look resentful. And whatever happens, do not fidget. Apparently nothing ruins a negotiation like visible nerves. The man steps into the courtyard. He's not the worst you imagined, but he's not the best either. His beard is tidy, his clothes are plain. He nods to you once briefly. That might be the only nod you ever get. You're already inventing questions in your head. Does he like music? Can he fix a loom? Will he yell about lentils? He sits beside your father. Your dowry is mentioned. You hear the words fertile land and well-behaved. You try not to think about the goat you're leaving behind. The negotiations begin. They talk around you about you like you're not here. You may as well be another clay pot on the table inspected for cracks and passed around for value. You try to breathe evenly. Your hands are in your lap. You look at the bowl of honey beside you and wonder if anyone else feels like it's a metaphor. You crack a joke to your sister. Maybe I'll hide in the grain jar until they forget I exist. She snorts and quickly turns it into a cough. Your mother gives you a look, the kind that means, don't tempt fate. But you needed that joke. It's your armor. That and the scarf wrapped around your shoulders. The process stretches into the afternoon. There's tea, there are figs, there's a long discussion about whether your family's one remaining goose counts as part of the dowry. You lose track of time. You study your groom-to-be. He listens to your father with respectful silence, nodding occasionally. His eyes still haven't met yours, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe he doesn't want to make this harder. Or maybe he's already thinking about the goats. The marriage will include expectations. Children, obviously. Preferably sons. You're to manage the household, maintain a modest appearance, and keep your mother-in-law happy, which by all accounts is more difficult than plucking a chicken mid-flight. You imagine your future. A new courtyard. A new loom. Maybe a baby in your arms before the next full moon. You're not sure whether the thought makes you nervous or numb. Maybe both. The deal is done. You're engaged now, or betrothed, or promised. The word doesn't matter. The meaning is the same. Your story now bends in a direction you didn't choose. You step outside into the dusk, the sky painted with streaks of orange and plum. You stand very still. For the first time all day, no one is watching you. You look at your hands, small, strong, capable. They've kneaded bread, gathered wood, spun yarn, and soothed children. Soon they'll carry something else, a life not fully yours. You whisper a joke to the fading light. If he snores like a camel, I'm hiding in the date basket. It's not much, but it's yours. And it gets you through. You hear laughter behind you, your sister still listening. You smile. Tomorrow the preparations begin, but tonight you're still here. You're still you. And you're not done writing the parts they forgot to include. You're lying flat on your back, the mat beneath you, damp with sweat and old sesame oil, your knees drawn up and shaking. The room is dim and quiet. except for the rustling of cloth, the crackling of the fire, and the low voice of the midwife, chanting something ancient and almost musical. You've heard her say the same prayers to Anahita, goddess of fertility, for every woman in the village, and tonight she's saying them for you. You're about to give birth, and you're terrified. Not in a dramatic clutch the curtains kind of way. It's more like the terror has been living with you for months, now moving in quietly, sitting in your bones, humming to itself while you tried to sleep. Everyone told you what to expect. The women offered tips, advice, warning, sometimes contradictory. Your mother said to bite on a wooden spoon. Your aunt said to scream if it helped. Your sister said to picture your baby's face. The midwife said to pray. None of them said how bad it would hurt, or how alone it might feel even in a room full of people. Mainstream history tells us that childbirth in the Achaemenid Empire was a leading cause of death for women. There were no doctors here, no metal instruments sterilized over fire, no pain relief except courage, and maybe a sharp piece of leather to bite on. You have a room full of women who've done this before. They're boiling water, laying out herbs, preparing cloths, but you still feel like you're dangling from a rope over a pit, your body stretched between life and whatever waits beyond. Your belly tightens again, and this time it feels like your spine might snap. You squeeze your sister's hand. She winces but doesn't pull away. Here's a strange little fact. Some Persian midwives believed that drinking a mix of pomegranate juice and crushed sesame seeds would help open the body and speed the labor. You drank some earlier, wincing at the bitterness, wondering if it actually works or if it's just a distraction. Right now, you drink a goat's bathwater if it made this stop. The midwife moves quickly now. Her voice is sharper. The rhythm of the room shifts. You're trying to focus on her hands, on your breath, on anything but the way your body feels like it's being split by a god who didn't bother to explain the rules. You wonder if Atosa the queen screamed like this when she gave birth. Or did they give her a potion? Did she have 5 midwives, perfume pillows, and someone to brush her hair afterward? Historians still debate whether elite women in the Persian Empire had better outcomes during childbirth than commoners like you. Some say their wealth bought access to more skilled midwives, rare herbs, and privacy. Others argue that death didn't care about jewelry or gold-threaded robes. Queens bled too. Queens died too. You grip your sister's arm and try not to scream, but you scream anyway. No one shames you for it, not now. The pain is everywhere, throbbing in your back, twisting in your stomach, crawling up your spine. It's not poetic or symbolic. It's real. And it hurts, like something ancient and raw has decided to crawl out of you, whether you're ready or not. You remember the barley fields you worked just weeks ago, the way your hands moved through the stalks, the rhythm of harvest. You held your back then too, thinking any day now. And now it's here, the day, the hour, the moment, no turning back. Someone wipes your forehead, someone whispers to push. You do, with everything. And again, you don't remember the moment it happens. Not really. 1 second, the world is a blur of heat and fire and clenching pain, and then there's a cry. Thin, high wet. A sound you've never heard before, but instantly know by heart. You cry too, or maybe you just breathe finally. The baby's placed on your chest, still slick, still warm, still blinking at the world like it's too loud. You whisper something you didn't plan. Maybe a name, maybe a prayer, maybe both. The midwife nods. She looks relieved too. Your sister is crying. Your mother is smiling like she hasn't in weeks. There's relief, there's exhaustion, there's the creeping awareness that now the real work begins. You survived. You did what the Empire demands of you, what it has always demanded from women. You gave it another life, another potential worker soldier, mother wife. The Achaemenid machine keeps turning grease by sweat and birth blood. You lie there, your baby asleep beside you, and think of every woman who didn't make it. Every friend who bled out. Every neighbor who whispered goodbye between contractions. The ones who tried everything, prayers, herbs, strength, and still disappeared. You whisper a joke to your sister. If I survive this, I'm naming her after that stinky root the midwife made me drink. She snorts a laugh, and the tension in the room dissolves like sugar in tea. The midwife rolls her eyes, but she's smiling too. You're tired, so tired. But there's also something else. A flicker of pride, not the loud banner-waving kind, just a quiet thrum under your ribs. You did it. You endured. The fire in the corner crackles, someone stokes it, someone hums, the baby makes a tiny sound in her sleep. You close your eyes. And for the first time in a long time, the darkness is welcome. You're standing in front of the polished bronze mirror again. It's the one propped against a crooked shelf in your home, the kind of mirror that distorts things slightly, so you never quite know if your face looks puffy or if the metal's just tired. You tug your veil tighter and sigh. Not because you're vain, but because getting dressed as a woman in ancient Persia is less about style and more about survival. Today is market day. And even though you're not technically going to the market, you're just walking near it with a basket of bread for your cousin, you still need to look appropriate. Which is code for don't invite gossip. Don't look too nice or you'll be vain. Too messy and you're a disgrace. Too clean and you're clearly trying to attract someone's husband. You wrap your shawl a little tighter. You pin the corner of your veil to your shoulder. It immediately snags on your earring. Of course it does. Your daughter runs past you with her veil-off hair bouncing like she owns the air. You smile a little even as you call her back. She doesn't know yet. Not really. But she will. Mainstream history tells us that Persian women's clothing was a visible symbol of their social class, their modesty and their place in society. The long tunics, layered robes, and heavy veils weren't just fashion. They were regulation. Men had loose shirts and breeze-friendly trousers. Women wool up to your wrists, linen up to your chin, sandals if you're lucky, and heaven forbid you show an ankle without divine authorization. Here's an odd little nugget for you. Some Persian women used powdered lead to whiten their faces. A ghostly complexion meant wealth, purity, and detachment from the sun-drenched world of physical labor. Never mind that lead was slowly poisoning them. What's a little nerve damage in exchange for social credibility? You skip the lead powder. You're not suicidal, just sleepy. You line your eyes with coal the same way your mother taught you, with your pinky finger and a bit of spit. You smear some ochre on your cheeks. Maybe you look healthy. Maybe you look like you tripped into a pomegranate tree. It's hard to tell with this mirror. Historians still argue whether the veil was oppressive or protective. Some say it was a mark of ownership, a visual cue that women were spoken for and should be left alone. Others argue it gave women a strange kind of freedom-anonymity movement camouflage in a world where eyes lingered too long. You think they're both right. It is protection and it is prison. It is armor and it is shame. It depends on the day and on who's watching. You step into the street and feel every eye, even the ones that aren't looking, pressing against you. You don't make eye contact. You don't walk too fast. You don't let the wind lift the edge of your tunic. You are the portrait of modesty, or at least you try to be. The heat rises quickly. Your robe sticks to your back. You already regret the second shawl. You pass a stall with dates that smell like honey left too long in the sun. The vendor waves to a man. Not you. You keep walking. You're not here to shop. You're just here to deliver bread, remember. A man walks by with his head uncovered. His shirt is half open. No one stares at him. No one questions what he's doing here. You tug your veil down a little more and keep your eyes on the stones in the road. There's a breeze. It lifts your veil for half a second. You catch it quickly and hope no one noticed. You catch a woman's glance just for a moment. She's older. Her veil is tighter. Her eyes are sharper. She doesn't say anything, but you can hear the judgment in her silence. You sigh. This is the dance. The don't be seen but don't be suspicious dance. The blend in but not too much dance. The exist without being too visible waltz. You stop to adjust your sandal. It's come loose again. The leather strap flaps against your heel. You crouch, fixing it, careful not to let your tunic rise too far. A little boy rushes past you chasing a rooster. His feet are bare. His tunic is filthy. No one yells at him. You smile. You remember when you moved through the streets like that before the rules, before the veil, before you were expected to be quiet and careful and good, before your body became a conversation. Your daughter is still giggling somewhere behind you, chasing the rooster's tail. You almost envy her ignorance. Almost. You hand the bread to your cousin, exchange a few quiet words, and start back home. The sun is higher now. The street is busier. Men call to each other. Traders argue. The air smells like spice and sweat and something burning. Maybe a cart. Maybe lunch. You catch another woman's eye. This one is your age. Maybe younger. Her veil is patterned. Her tunic stitched with a little color. Someone will say something about it later. Someone always does. You whisper a joke under your breath. Maybe tomorrow I'll wear purple and start a scandal. No one hears you, but the joke is yours. And that counts. The veil slips again. You fix it again. You think of the queens in Susa, their servants brushing their hair, fanning their faces, tying their robes. You wonder if they ever wanted to rip it all off and run through the gardens screaming. Probably not. Or maybe yes. Maybe they did. Maybe they just learned how to scream without a sound, how to speak rebellion through silks and perfumes and subtle refusals. Maybe you're not so different. You arrive at your courtyard and step into the shade. You let your shawl slide down just a little. You take a deep breath. The air is thick, but it's yours. Your daughter is back, her veil askew, her hands sticky with fruit. You straighten her scarf and kiss her forehead. One day she'll walk the same streets, wear the same cloth, feel the same weight. But maybe she'll find a way to walk a little lighter. You close the door behind you, lean against the wall, and let the sweat dry slowly. And for now, that's enough. You're sitting in the shade of the courtyard wall, a spindle in one hand, wool in the other, twisting fibers into thread, as you've done since before you were tall enough to see over the grain jars. But today your hands move slower. Your eyes keep drifting toward your brother's voice, drifting in from the next room as he recites something, a hymn, a line of cuneiform, a passage from the priest's scroll. You know the tune, but not the meaning. You've heard the words before, but never seen them written. That door, the one marked learning, never opened for you. In ancient Persia, education was a privilege, and a gendered one. Mainstream history tells us that boys, particularly sons of noblemen, received formal instruction. They learned to read cuneiform, to calculate taxes on clay tablets, to memorize hymns, military rules, and family lineages. You, however, were handed a spindle and a water jar and told that knowledge lived in the kitchen, the loom, and the cradle. You glance down at the wool between your fingers. It's soft familiar. The rhythm of spinning is a kind of meditation. You know this. You're good at this. But still you wonder what those strange marks look like on clay. What secrets they hold. What power they carry. Your brother stumbles over a word and curses softly. You smirk. He's writing bread when he means brick. Again you whisper to your friend beside you. She snorts, trying to hide her laugh behind a cough. You both know he'll get praised later for his effort, while you'll be reminded to mind the fire and not overknead the dough. Here's a curious little fact some noble Persian women, especially royal daughters, were taught to read. Not for poetry or philosophy, but so they could manage household estates while their husbands were off conquering other people's lands. Imagine a queen at her desk, stylus in hand, drafting orders for wool deliveries and olive counts. You picture yourself there for a moment, issuing commands to a room full of scribes sipping honey water like a goddess of spreadsheets. But back in your village, you're still twisting wool, your only letters the knots in a braided rope. Historians still debate whether common women ever received any form of informal education. Some suggest religious instruction learning, prayers by repetition passed down from mothers to daughters, was a form of literacy in its own right. Others argue that excluding women from reading and writing was deliberate a tool for keeping power within male hands and minds. You're not sure which side is right. All you know is that you're tired of asking what words mean, and being told don't worry about it. Still, you find your own ways to learn. You've memorized the trader's price list by listening closely while your brother haggles. You know how to estimate weights, just by lifting a sack. You can recite half a dozen purification rituals from memory even if you've never read them. You can tell when a storm is coming from the way the goats act. You remember every gossip thread in the village and can trace bloodlines better than the local scribe. But none of that counts in the Empire's eyes, not if you can't press it into clay. Your mother once said, "You don't need to read to keep a house." Maybe she's right, but sometimes you lie awake at night wondering what it would feel like to read a letter, not just hear it read to you, to write your own story, to put your name in a tablet and know it would be there tomorrow. You think of carving your own epic into the side of the well. The Saga of the Itchy Veil, you'd call it. Chapter 1. The Strap That Wouldn't Stay Tied. Chapter 2. The Pomegranate Incident. Chapter 3. A dramatic monologue to a silent goat. You smile at the thought. Your fingers pause over the wool. Your friend catches the smirk and nudges you with her elbow. You whisper, "Maybe I'll invent a code. Hide it in my weaving." She raises an eyebrow. What would it say? You glance at your brother still reading aloud from the tablet like it might float away if he stops. It would say, "Teach the girls or the goats will revolt." Your friend nearly chokes on her laugh. You go back to spinning. Your rhythm returns. The wheel hums. The courtyard buzzes with voices and pots and the thud of someone chopping herbs. Life as always carries on. But something's shifted. You catch your daughter watching you from across the courtyard. Her hair's in her eyes. Her dress is crooked. She's pretending not to listen. But you know that look. She's curious. She wants to understand. You beckon her over. She sits beside you, legs crossed, eyes wide. You hand her a piece of wool. "Let me show you," you say. And her fingers fumble, her brow furrows, but she smiles. You whisper the names of herbs as you pass them. You hum a prayer as you spin. You tell her what numbers look like when you count with beads. You're not a teacher, not officially. But you're beginning something. A quiet rebellion made of thread and song. The Empire may not want you literate, but you've read the sky. You've written in bread. You've memorized a lifetime in a glance. And now you're passing it on. You're kneeling on the smooth, cool floor of your home, your knees stiff from hours of movement, your fingers smelling faintly of ash and lemon balm. The clay bowl in front of you is filled with water steeped with pomegranate leaves and crushed mint, and you're flicking droplets at the doorframe in a careful, practiced rhythm. Not because you feel particularly superstitious this morning, but because it's your duty, another layer in the ritual maze that shapes your life. In ancient Persia, religion wasn't just a belief system, it was a full-time occupation. Zoroastrianism, the empire's guiding flame, asked its followers to uphold three principles: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. It sounds simple, even poetic. But for women, those good deeds included an endless carousel of ritual purification, obedience, and silence. You've already done your share of good deeds today, and it's not even noon. Mainstream history tells us that Zoroastrianism placed a heavy emphasis on purity, not just moral purity, but physical cleanliness, clean homes, clean bodies, clean fire altars. Women were seen as sacred in their roles as caretakers, but also as potentially unclean during menstruation, childbirth, or any number of everyday events that somehow rendered you temporarily unsuitable for temple spaces. So you keep the fire stoked. You sprinkle sacred water around the house. You recite prayers by heart, of course, since you were never taught to read them. You don't complain. Not allowed anyway. Your mother-in-law watches from the threshold, arms crossed, her eyes sharp enough to cut sandstone. She's waiting for you to miss a step, forget a chant, or skip the incense. You whisper the words a little louder to make sure she hears. She nods just barely, then disappears into the shadows again. Your cousin walks past and gives you a look. You pass the test for today. Here's something curious for you. Some Zoroastrian ceremonies included a sacred drink called haoma, made from a mysterious plant mixed with water milk and sometimes pomegranate. It was said to bring courage and clarity. You've never tasted it. You've only prepared it, grinding the plant's stems with a heavy pestle until your arms burned, while the men chanted beside the sacred fire. You still remember the smell, sharp green, almost bitter. And you remember thinking, if this makes you courageous, why won't they let us drink it? Historians still debate whether Zoroastrianism empowered women through spiritual roles or simply added more unpaid labor to their lives. On one hand, women were trusted with important tasks, tending fires, preparing purification rites, safeguarding the home's spiritual balance. On the other hand, you weren't allowed near the temple during unclean days. You couldn't lead rituals. You couldn't question the rules, only follow them. You're still flicking water at the corners of the room, murmuring the chants as you go. Your daughter mimics you nearby, holding her own tiny bowl like it's a relic from the royal temple. She's humming your prayer a half second behind getting the words wrong, but the spirit right. You don't correct her. You just smile. Later, you're scrubbing the stone base of your household altar. Your knees ache. Your back throbs. The sacred fire flickers beside you, and the smoke clings to your hair, your clothes, your thoughts. You offer barley to the flame, just a pinch, and whisper a prayer for health, for protection, for peace. You pause. You wonder, has Ahura Mazda ever heard you? Not just the household, not just the family, you. You remember the ritual you performed after childbirth, alone, exhausted, clutching the herbs the midwife gave you while trying not to weep. You remember being told not to enter the kitchen for 3 days, not to touch anything sacred, not to disrupt the balance. You wonder how the gods keep track of all these rules. You whisper a joke to your cousin as she passes with a bundle of kindling. I think the fire's purer than my patience. She stifles a laugh. The priest standing nearby scowls. You both fall quiet. But the laughter stays warm in your chest. You complete the final circle of water and stand. The room smells like herbs and ash and quiet triumph. You glance toward your daughter, still kneeling at her makeshift altar. She's placing flowers crooked, clumsy, perfect. You think of the queens in Susa with their private sanctuaries and elite priests. You wonder if they ever resented the weight of so many expectations, or did they light the incense and smile and move on too? You'll never know, but you do know this. You've done everything right today, or close enough. You've tended the sacred flame. You've recited the sacred words. You've lived the sacred life, even if it's one no one ever thanks you for. You lower the curtain that separates the altar from the rest of the room. The fire crackles softly behind it. Your daughter is humming again, lost in her play. Your cousin is making tea, the scent curling through the doorway. And you sit back on your heels, rub your aching legs, and allow yourself one deep, selfish breath. Just one. And then you rise again because there's barley to grind, prayers to whisper, and a world to keep in balance. You're standing in the sun-drenched courtyard of your neighbor's home, the kind of place where you've borrowed onions, shared gossip, and once accidentally chased a chicken straight through the cook fire. But today, your hands are clasped in front of you, your veil pulled tight and your heart thudding a little too loudly in your chest. You're not here to visit. You're here because someone said you stole something, a jar of goat's milk, or maybe it was a pestle, or maybe just someone's pride, and now you're being dragged into the Achaemenid legal system. A system built by men, enforced by men, and run entirely on the idea that you as a woman should speak softly or not at all. Mainstream history tells us the Achaemenid Empire had one of the most advanced legal systems of its time. There were royal judges, provincial magistrates, and carefully preserved clay tablets, tracking everything from land disputes to grain debts. But for you, the sophistication means very little, because you're not allowed to speak for yourself. Your father, brother, husband, someone has to speak on your behalf. Your story must pass through their mouth to reach the ears of the judge, and if they get it wrong, well, you'd better hope it's not too wrong. Today, it's your brother standing in the square with you. He's trying to explain what happened, but he's never been good with details. You open your mouth to clarify something, and he shoots you a look that says, "Don't. You'll just make it worse." You press your lips shut and dig your nails into your palm. The judge, a tall man with a beard like a hedge, and eyes like week old ash, sits on a carved stool under a canopy. He doesn't look at you, not once. He taps a stylus against a clay tablet, occasionally muttering something to the scribe beside him. You want to scream. That's not how it happened. But instead, you stare at a crack in the wall and try not to cry. Here's a strange but true fact. In rare cases, women in the Persian Empire could sign small loan guarantees. They weren't allowed to initiate big contracts or speak in court without a male proxy, but if you were lucky and persistent, you might convince a man to vouch for you so you could buy or sell something. Once you nearly did that, you considered offering your shawl as collateral. Then you remembered your uncle saying, "That's how trouble starts." Historians still argue whether Persian women had subtle influence in the courts through their male relatives or whether they were completely silenced by design. Some believe elite women could sway verdicts behind the scenes through whispers, favors, or reputation. Others argue that, unless you were a queen, you were effectively invisible. A name without a voice. You believe it. Because right now your brother is mixing up the story, forgetting key details, and the judge still isn't looking at you. You want to scream, "It was just milk, and it wasn't even mine." But the wind carries no voice for you today. The accuser, a man you've known since you were a child, is staring you down with smug satisfaction. He knows you can't defend yourself. He knows your fate rests in the hands of people who weren't there, don't understand, or don't care. You think of the barley you ground yesterday, the water you hauled, the sandals you mended. You think of the fire you keep lit and the meals you cook and the child you carried with no help from anyone. None of that is written on a tablet. None of that matters here. Your sister stands behind you, her hand briefly brushing your arm. It's the only moment of comfort you'll get today. You lean into it just for a second, pretending it's armor. You whisper a joke inside your head. Maybe I should just grab a stylus and write the truth myself. You picture the judge's face if you stormed the platform, stylus in hand, yelling objection like some temple drama. You imagine your sister clapping, the crowd gasping, your goat cheering. You almost smile. But you don't, because this isn't a story and you're not the author. The judge finally speaks, scribbles something down and waves his hand. You've been fined, your family will have to pay, or your dowry might be docked, or if things go really badly, you'll owe labor. All because someone said something and you weren't allowed to say otherwise. You lower your head, you nod, you leave. You walk back home with your brother grumbling beside you. You don't speak, not because you're afraid now, but because you're so full of words you think you might burst. You pass a woman sweeping her doorstep and she gives you a look that says she heard. Everyone always hears. Back in your courtyard, you sit beside the loom and start spinning. The rhythm calms you, your daughter watches from a distance. She's heard something too, you can see it in her eyes. You smile at her. Then you whisper, "Next time I'll write my own tablet." She grins. The loom clacks softly, the sun shifts, the fire crackles, and you keep weaving. Because you know someday someone will listen. You're hovering just outside the bustling market square. Your basket heavy with carefully folded cloth. Your veil pulled low and your mouth stitched shut with caution. You're not here to shop. You're not here to sell. You're here to pass something to your cousin, which just happens to require weaving through shouting merchants, snorting camels, and the occasional goat that seems a little too smug for its own good. You're not supposed to be here alone. You know that. Everyone knows that. Mainstream history tells us the Achaemenid markets were marvels of logistics, goods from India, Egypt, and Greece traded alongside fresh fruit, fine wool, and expensive perfumes. But while the men haggled over spices and scrolls, the women stood at the edges silent as shadows, their labor tucked away behind closed doors, their profits claimed by someone else. You watch as your brother negotiates the price of your cloth, the one you wove, the one you dyed with crushed madder root, your fingers red for days. He says nothing about that to the merchant, just talks about the thread count and how his sister makes a decent weave. You want to say, it's not decent, it's flawless. But your job is to keep your eyes down and your tongue quiet. Here's a quirky little secret. Some women found loopholes. They'd send male relatives to the market with beer they brewed or cloth they made, offering quiet instructions from the shadows. Occasionally, a clever cousin or soft-hearted brother would pass along the full profit. Usually, though, you got a nod, a pat on the head, and whatever coin they thought you deserved. Maybe a fig. If they were generous, you'd dream sometimes of your own stall, one with a bright awning, a neat stack of wares, a price list that you control. You'd call it something dramatic like the Threaded Rebellion. Your sister says you should include cookies. You agree. Historians still argue whether women were completely excluded from the market life or found subtle ways to participate. Some suggest elite women could trade through stewards. Others insist commoners like you had no choice but to sneak around the edges, handing over your work for others to claim. You're feeling the edge right now, literally. You're standing at the boundary stone where the shade ends and the marketplace begins. You could step forward. You could call out to the merchant yourself, but you don't. You think about the last time a woman raised her voice here. She was selling herbs, nothing scandalous, but people talked. Called her bold, unruly, dangerous. Within a week, her brother was the one managing her stand. Your fingers clutch the edge of the basket. You whisper a joke to your sister as she steps beside you. Maybe I'll trade myself for a camel and ride off to Egypt. She grins. You'd get bored halfway there. She's right, but it's fun to imagine. You hand over the cloth. Your cousin smiles, thanks you, walks off to sell it. He'll probably say his mother made it. She can't even thread a needle, but no one will question it. You and your sister linger, pretending to admire the pottery on display. The vendor, an older woman, gives you a subtle nod. You nod back. There's a silent network of women here. Not just in the market, but in the world. You can feel it in the way eyes meet, in the way baskets are passed, in the way no one asks questions, but everyone knows the truth. You move through the rows slowly, not shopping, just breathing it in, the sounds, the smells, the rhythm. You catch a glimpse of a scribe tallying grain on a clay tablet, and you wonder if your name has ever appeared on one. Not likely, but maybe your cloth has, or your thread, or your dye. It's strange, isn't it? You help build the wealth of the empire, and yet you're not allowed to touch the scales that measure it. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a merchant carrying bolts of imported silk. He doesn't look at you, just mutters something about obstacles and keeps walking. You want to laugh. Obstacle. You're the one weaving his inventory. You and your sister finally step back from the square your basket now light your coins few. On the way home you whisper, next time we ask for double. She doesn't laugh this time. She nods. You walk quietly for a while, the sun warming your backs, your sandals kicking up dust. You think about the market again, about how much you love it. Not just for the goods, but for the stories. The swirl of people, the flash of color, the brief taste of movement, even if it isn't yours. And you promise yourself something. Someday you'll sell your own cloth, not through a cousin, not from the shadows, with your name on it, your price, your voice. You just need the right moment, and a better stall name. You're crouched in front of your bronze mirror again, if you can even call it a mirror. It's warped and dull around the edges, and when the light hits it wrong, you look more like a goat than a girl. Still, it's all you've got. And today, you need it, because there's a gathering tonight and you've been told again to look presentable. Presentable. That word does a lot of work. Not too beautiful, or you'll be accused of trying to tempt someone's husband. Not too plain, or your mother-in-law will ask if you're ill. Somewhere in the middle, like a fig that's ripe, but not too ripe. Just modest enough to say, I am dignified. Just polished enough to say, I am marriageable. Just exhausted enough to say, I haven't had time for myself in 7 years. You pull your veil back and begin the process. Your hair has to be pinned in tight coils. Loose hair is fine for little girls and unruly women who don't care if the gods are watching. You do care mostly because the gods aren't the ones judging you. It's everyone else. Mainstream history reminds us that in the Achaemenid Empire, women, especially in villages, were expected to maintain a certain appearance. Clean hair, clear skin, tidy robes. It wasn't vanity, it was respectability. Your face was the front door of your family's reputation, and tonight that door better shine. You reach for your jar of ochre, the pigment you use to redden your cheeks. It smells like dust and riverbank, and it clings to your skin with a determination you almost admire. You dab it on carefully, hoping to look healthy and not like you've been smacked by a tomato. Your kohl stick is next. You line your eyes with slow, steady movements, not too thick, not too smudged, just enough to say, yes, I woke up like this, but also I'm not a barbarian. Here's a strange little detail. Persian women sometimes used henna not just on their hair, but on their hands, painting delicate swirls and dots across their palms and fingers. You tried it last month with your cousin, both of you giggling in secret. Hers looked like vines. Yours looked like someone let a toddler draw with a beat. You whisper a joke to yourself as you attempt a small dot on your thumb. Maybe abstract art is in this year. Your sister pokes her head in and laughs. It looks like a chicken danced on your hand. You laugh too, because what else can you do? You reach for your earrings, bronze hoops passed down from your grandmother. They pinch your ears and make your neck ache, but you wear them anyway. Not because they're comfortable, because they matter, because they say you're trying, because even if no one says it, you know everyone notices when you don't. Historians still argue whether beauty rituals were empowering or oppressive. Some say it was the only space women had to express themselves, to feel seen, to control something. Others argue that these expectations kept you in a loop of quiet performance. Paint your face, hide your thoughts, look modest, don't ask why. You look at yourself now in the bronze cheeks, warm lips tinted with crushed berries, hair-pinned hands trembling slightly. You don't feel powerful. You feel like a puppet in her best shawl. But there's still something defiant in the act, in refusing to fade, in refusing to let the years, the chores, the stares, the silences erase your face. You think of the queens, in Susa again. Atossa probably had servants to paint her lips and brush her hair. She probably had bowls of rose water and jasmine oil lined up on a marble shelf. She probably never had to use soot from the hearth to make her eyes stand out. But then again, maybe she never got to joke about it either. Maybe she never got to paint her sister's hands with crooked spirals and laugh until her ribs ached. Maybe power isn't always silk and status. Maybe sometimes it's sharing a mirror with someone who loves you. You fasten your robe. You adjust your veil. You take a breath. You step outside. The evening is soft and golden. The sky glows like a dying ember. Other women move along the path toward the gathering eyes-lined robes, ironed smiles pinned in place. You join them, blending in, yet burning a little inside. You pass a man who glances at your earrings, then quickly looks away. You smirk. You whisper to your sister they're staring because of my chicken henna. She rolls her eyes. Definitely. You walk on. Because whether it's rebellion or resignation ritual or resistance, you're here. You're showing up. You're glowing under layers of expectation and coal dust and stubborn grace. You're not just beautiful. You're visible. And that's more than most people will ever admit. You're sitting on a silk cushion in a room that smells like roses and rules. The walls are painted with pale blue and gold, the ceiling hung with delicate lamps that swing ever so slightly when someone breathes too hard. But you don't dare breathe too hard. You don't move much at all. You're a concubine now. Not a wife, not a servant, something in between, something blurred. You've traded the noise of the village for the hush of the palace. The dust of the fields for the polish of marble, the chaos of the market for the silence of waiting, always waiting, for the summons, for the glance, for the decision that will place you at the king's side or forget you like last week's perfume. Your robes are finer now, sheer and perfume threaded with gold. Your hands are soft, your hair oiled, your smile perfected. And still you are not free. Mainstream history tells us that Achaemenid kings kept vast harems, collections of women from across the empire. Some were daughters of noblemen, some were war captives, and some, like you, were chosen for beauty or bloodlines or both. You've been told you're lucky. You're not entirely sure what they mean by that. The harem is its own world. A world of cushions and whispers of soft footsteps and sharp glances. You sleep with dozens of women, eat with them, bathe with them, laugh with them, and never quite trust any of them. because here friendship can cost you your place, and place is everything. Here's a curious detail. Some concubines were trained in music and dance, not just for pleasure, but for politics. A song well sung, a story well told could tilt favor your way. You've been learning to play the lyre. Your fingers fumble over the strings, but your voice has steadied. It's not for joy, it's for survival. You sing softly at dusk, your voice like honey laced with nerves. You pretend not to notice the others listening. One girl scowls, another nods. The favorite of the month, she's quiet. She doesn't need to sing, she already has his attention. You know how quickly that can change. Historians still argue whether concubines had real power or were simply prisoners in prettier cages. Some say the king's favorite could sway politics, gain wealth, even raise sons to high rank. Others argue they were disposable, their lives measured in moments of pleasure and obedience. You look around and see both truths. One woman near you owns land now. She sends messages by steward. She wears more bangles than a priest's wife. Another sits in silence. Her eyes blank her fingers, nervously plucking at the edge of her robe. She hasn't been summoned in weeks. Everyone knows what that means. You whisper to the girl beside you, "If I'm not chosen this month, I'm starting a lyre band with the palace cats." She giggles a breathy sound, careful not to be heard. It's a risky joke, but laughter is rare here, and that makes it precious. You think of your village sometimes, of dust and sandals, of bread and goats. You hated the endless work, but at least it was honest. At least you weren't a prize, wrapped in silk, waiting for a bell to ring. At night you lie awake in your corner of the harem chamber, surrounded by sighs and dreams and regrets. You remember the barley fields, the oil lamps, the thread between your fingers. You miss your sister's terrible jokes. You miss the feeling of being useful. Here you are beautiful. Here you are replaceable. You wonder if the queens feel the same. Atossa, perhaps, powerful but watched, worshipped but tethered. You've seen her from a distance, tall, quiet, radiant. She doesn't speak unless she must. She doesn't flinch when bowed to. She walks like a woman who's learned to navigate fire without getting burned. You're still learning. The king doesn't summon you this week, or the next. You keep singing anyway. You polish your bangles. You help another girl learn the scale. You fix a broken hair comb. You keep existing. That's the game here. Stay ready, stay silent, stay seen. You've become so good at disappearing in plain sight. One afternoon, a eunuch delivers a robe to your quarters. Pale blue embroidered. It means you've been noticed. Maybe tomorrow you'll be summoned. You hang the robe near your mat. You stare at it for a long time. And then you turn away and pick up your lyre. You still have a song to practice, because even in this cage you refuse to go quiet. You sit on the edge of your mat, in the corner of the house, your hands folded stiffly in your lap. The clay walls flicker with the shadows of a low-burning lamp. Outside, the wind rattles the branches of the fig tree your husband planted when you were first married. Inside, the silence feels thick, like someone draped a heavy cloth over the whole world. Your husband is gone. It happened quietly. A fever, a cough, the kind of illness that starts with a sore throat and ends with the neighbors coming by to whisper condolences and leave lentil stew. You didn't cry during the ritual washing, not when the priest chanted the verses, not even when they buried him by the eastern wall where the morning sun hits first. But now in this quiet, the grief creeps in not as wailing but as a slow, tightening ache, like a rope around your ribs. You are a widow now, and that changes everything. In ancient Persia, being a widow didn't make you free. It made you vulnerable. You might no longer belong to a husband, but that didn't mean you suddenly belonged to yourself. The laws weren't built for women to live alone. Without a man, father, husband, brother, son, you were untethered, suspicious, a piece of grain swept outside the granary. Mainstream history tells us that some elite women, particularly royal widows, could manage large estates after their husbands died. They could issue orders through male stewards, correspond with palace officials, and in rare cases hold real influence. But those were women in palaces, women with seals and scribes. You are not one of those women. You are sitting on a mat that's thinning with age in a home built of mud and straw, with only a half-empty grain jar and 2 goats left in the courtyard. Your brother-in-law comes by the second morning after the burial. He doesn't say he's here to claim anything, but his eyes linger a little too long on the courtyard, on the loom by the wall, on the basket of barley you've been saving. He tells you to rest. He tells you not to worry.
You worry anyway.
Your daughter, still small and soft-cheeked, plays with pebbles near the cooking pit. She doesn't understand yet. She only knows that the house feels quieter, that your face feels tighter, and that the man who used to toss her in the air isn't coming back. You remember the moment your mother became a widow. You were just old enough to notice how the neighbors started whispering louder, how your uncles came to help manage the household and never left, how your mother stopped wearing colored shawls, how her laugh vanished behind her teeth. You wonder if you've inherited that silence now. Here's something odd and a little bleak. Some Persian widows, especially in rural villages, turned to making incense or herbal bundles to earn what they could. It was one of the few trades considered respectable enough not to invite judgment or worse, accusations of impropriety. You've done it before. You know how to dry basil leaves and press them into little clay pots with myrrh and honey. You even have a few bundles wrapped in cloth tucked in a basket under your sleeping mat. You're thinking of bringing them to the market, but there's a problem: you can't go alone. Historians still debate whether widows had any legal recourse to claim property or continue running a household. Some say women could appeal to local magistrates, especially if they had sons old enough to act as proxies. Others argued that in most cases property passed directly to the deceased man's male relatives, and the widow became politely part of the inheritance. You think of your brother-in-law again, how he paused before leaving yesterday and said, "You should consider remarrying. A woman alone is too exposed." You smiled. You said you'd think about it. You didn't say that the idea of marrying his friend, the one with the limp and the habit of spitting at your doorstep, makes your stomach churn. You whisper a joke to yourself later while grinding coriander for supper. "Maybe I'll marry the goat. At least he listens." Your sister, who's visiting with her own children, hears you and snorts. "Careful. He's probably got better prospects." You both laugh, but the air between you stays heavy, because you know what's coming. If you don't remarry, you may lose this house. The goats, the loom, your daughter's spot in the line for water at the well. Everything you built with your husband, brick by brick, night by night, could be parceled out like dried figs at a funeral. But if you do remarry, you'll lose something else yourself. You remember the early days of your first marriage, the way you bent yourself into shapes to keep the household smooth, the way your voice shrank, the way you stopped humming during chores. And it wasn't that he was cruel. He wasn't. But he lived in a world that taught him to speak and you to nod. And you've only just started to unlearn that. Now, with the fire low and your daughter curled beside you, you reach for your basket of herbs. You unwrap one bundle lavender and dried rose petals and sniff it. The scent is soft calming. It smells like something old and good, like something you made entirely with your own hands. You wonder what it would feel like to sell one, to hand it to a stranger in exchange for coin, to build something that doesn't come through someone else's name. You set the bundle aside. You'll try tomorrow. Maybe your sister's husband can walk it to the market stall. Maybe he'll take the credit. Maybe not. Either way, it's a start. You think again of the widows in other villages, your mother, your neighbors, even the old woman down the path who lives with 5 cats and no regrets. You wonder if she was ever told she was too exposed. You decide you'd rather be exposed than erased. The next morning, you wake before the sun. You grind herbs, you sew small pouches, you boil water for ink and write your name on a piece of cloth, not to sell with the bundle, but just to see it there. Just to remind yourself you exist. The house is still yours. The fire, the ghost, the girl with the pebble game's yours. The grief too, but also the will. And you'll keep going. Even if you're not invited to. Even if you have to whisper your name into the wind just to hear it once without permission. You're standing in the dusty courtyard, eyes fixed on the fields that stretch out just beyond the fence. The morning light spills over them in sheets, turning the barley golden and the sky sharp and blue. But the fields don't belong to you. Not anymore. Maybe they never did. Your husband is gone, and with him your claim. In ancient Persia, land passed through male hands like water through cupped palms, fluid, slippery, and never meant to stay with women. Mainstream history tells us that property laws in the Achaemenid Empire were designed to keep wealth concentrated through male lineage. Daughters, wives, and widows might work, the land managed the animals, even raised the sons who'd inherit it, but they couldn't own it. Not in name, not in law. You worked these fields. You planted those barley seeds. You counted the goats, salted the soil, stitched the sacks. You even remembered which corner needed more water after last summer's drought. But the clay tablet with the boundary mark, it bears your brother-in-law's name now. He arrived yesterday with a scribe. Said it was time to settle things properly. You stood off to the side, veil pulled tight, hands balled into fists beneath your shawl. You said nothing. Not because you agreed, but because your voice has no ink on it. You were allowed to keep the courtyard, a gesture of mercy apparently. Your home is now legally someone else's outbuilding. Your daughter asks, "Can we still walk in the field?" You don't answer. You just nod very slowly and say, "Only to the path." Here's something curious. In extremely rare cases, elite women, especially widows of satraps or royal figures, could manage entire estates. They issued orders through male stewards, oversaw harvest reports, even sent grain to other provinces. But even then, the land legally belonged to a son or male heir. The woman was a placeholder, a steward of a steward. Power borrowed, never owned. Historians still debate whether common village women like you could ever claim land even informally. Some point to oral traditions where mothers held onto small plot or kitchen gardens. Others say it was all theater women were always one illness or funeral away from losing everything. You're leaning toward the second, because today, your kitchen garden doesn't feel like yours either. The neighbor boy has already wandered in, saying your brother-in-law told him to gather basil. You didn't argue. You just stared at the sprigs in his hand and thought about all the mornings you woke before the sun to water those roots. You whisper a joke to yourself as you kneel to retie the garden fence. Maybe I'll start charging for the weeds. At least those grow for me. Your neighbor hears and chuckles softly. She's a widow too. You exchange a look, one part sympathy, one part shared rage. She once tried to take her brother-in-law to court over a patch of lentil fields, lost before the tablet was even dry. The men say land doesn't know who plows it, but you do. You remember every stone, every plant, every year you turned the soil with hands blistered from weaving. You taught your daughter to walk between the rows to spot the best barley heads, to speak gently to the goats. You carved your life into this land like thread into cloth. And now you're supposed to forget. You sit beside your loom later that afternoon, the thread stiff and stubborn. Everything feels slower now. Your hands don't move with their usual rhythm. You keep thinking about that clay tablet, the one the scribe pressed yesterday. How clean his fingers looked. How fast he wrote you out of the picture. Out. The fire crackles in the corner. Your daughter hums as she plays with a handful of broken potsherds. You stare at her small hands and wonder if they'll ever be allowed to hold a deed. You think of the concubines in the palace draped in silk, caged in gardens. You think of the queens managing estates they never truly owned. You think of your own mother who lived and died in a house she swept every day but never once had her name on. You think of all the women whose work turned soil into bread and wool into wealth, and who were told in the end, you don't count. But you do count, even if the law says otherwise, even if the tablet forgets. You plant 3 new rows in your garden that evening, beans, onions, and something wild you found growing by the stream. You mark them with pebbles. You tell your daughter, these are ours. She nods, eyes serious. Even the onions, especially the onions you whisper, because onions like women grow quietly, layered, sharp, hard to digest if you don't treat them right. You sit in the courtyard as the sun dips low. You run your fingers through the dirt, rough but familiar. The goats chew contentedly behind you, unaware of deeds and signatures and stolen names. And you decide something. You may not own the land, but it remembers you, and you will keep planting anyway. You're weaving again. The loom creaks softly in the morning, quiet its rhythm, familiar grounding. The warp is tight, the weft smooth beneath your fingers. Outside the village hums awake roosters calling neighbors, sweeping, someone arguing already about figs. But here in this square of sunlight and thread, there is calm. You've been through so much marriage. Widowhood, loss, laughter, silence, survival. You've knelt at the altar. You've scrubbed floors that weren't yours. You've raised a daughter in a house that felt like it belonged to everyone but you. And still here you are, older now, wiser. Not yet old enough to be forgotten, but you can feel the edge of it creeping in like cold in the joints. You're no longer the first one called when someone needs advice. Your voice, once sharp with purpose, is softer now. People talk over you sometimes, but you've learned how to let them, and then say exactly what needs saying when the moment is right. Mainstream history rarely talks about aging women, not unless they were queens or mystics. But in the villages, in the spaces between temples and tablets, women like you are everywhere, carrying stories, holding communities together, teaching by doing. You may not be praised, but you are remembered in quiet ways. In the way your daughter folds a robe. In the way your neighbor adds mint to her lentils. In the way someone pauses before lighting the sacred fire because you once showed them how. There's a fig tree outside your home now. Not the same one your husband planted, he's been gone too long for that, but a sapling your daughter and her daughter planted last spring. It's growing taller than you expected. The kind of height that surprises you makes you step back and smile. You sit under it some afternoons teaching the children to braid reeds into dolls. They don't always listen. That's fine. You didn't either back then. But they come back the next day asking about the gods, or the time a goat wandered into the fire altar, or how to dye wool with madder root. And you tell them, piece by piece, joke by joke, truth wrapped in laughter, wisdom hidden in everyday things. Here's a lovely little fact. Some Persian women as they aged became oral historians. Not officially, not with titles, but in the way stories passed through them, picked up flavor, got heavier with memory. You've become that now. A keeper of tales, a thread through generations. Historians still debate whether old women were respected or pushed aside. Some say they became matriarchs, the heads of households. Others say they were forgotten once they could no longer bear children or kneel for long prayers. You're not sure where you fall in that argument. But today your daughter kisses your cheek before leaving for the well, and your granddaughter tucks a flower behind your ear while you finish a braid. So maybe you haven't disappeared yet. Tonight there's a small gathering in the courtyard. Just neighbors, family, a few children squabbling over flatbread. Someone lights a fire. Someone brings out a flute. Someone says, "Tell us the story about the woman who cursed the judge and ran off with a goat." You laugh. That one again. They nod. You tell it. The children listen with wide eyes. The older women grin knowingly. The younger ones watch you like a mystery. You feel your words settle around them like a shawl. Soft, familiar, woven with love and thread and time. You lean back against the mud brick wall, the fire warm against your legs, the stars blinking into life above you. And for a moment, just one perfect moment, you are not tired. You are not invisible. You are not waiting for something to change. You are here. You have made it. And even if no scribe will carve your name into clay, you have carved it into hearts, into laughter, into memory. That's more than history. That's legacy. So now let the fire burn low. Let the loom rest, the bread rise slowly, the goats settle in for the night. You've walked a long winding road through palace gates and village paths, through silence and song, through pain and stubborn joy. You've heard the echo of history in every prayer, every whispered joke, every bowl passed from hand to hand. You've seen how a woman's life was bent and bound, but never broken. You've felt the sting of being forgotten, and the quiet power of remembering yourself. So breathe. Feel the night wrap around you like a wool shawl, soft and worn, carrying the scent of earth and ash and jasmine. The stars above are the same stars that watch the queens, the concubines, the weavers, the midwives, the daughters. They are watching you too. You are not alone. You never were. And now as your eyes grow heavy, as your breath slows, as the weight of history softens into a lullaby, rest. You've carried enough today. You've endured, created, whispered, roared, and tomorrow you'll rise again. But for now, let the story fade. Let the darkness cradle you. Let sleep take you gently like a thread pulled through silk.